Hello everyone, and welcome to National Library Week, and we are also celebrating NASA at My Library. To do that, we've got a whole panel of staff members who also love sci-fi. It's kind of a nice mix of libraries and science fiction that we're going to be talking about in this panel group today. And so, to start off with this wonderful panel here, I want to ask and have you all introduce yourselves. What do you do at the library? What's your name? And why is sci-fi relevant for what you do at the library?
Sure. Well, hi, I'm Hilary Perino. I am an early literacy specialist. That means that I get to play with little kids all day. I do story times and programmings, mostly for the under 5 group. Why is sci-fi important to my work? Well, other than just reading recommendations and just getting to read awesome books, I think that sci-fi is important because it stretches the way that your mind works. I like to say that little kids look at real world as sci-fi. It's all new to them. So the more that you can be creative in your thinking, the better you're able to relate to new little people on Earth.
Hi, I'm Shannon Urban. I'm the head of Adult and Digital Services. I manage the reference desk and our adult programming. That means for science fiction in the library that we have Reader's Advisory. When you come to the desk, we'll help you locate your next great read. For programming, we help do celebrations like National Library Week and NASA at My Library. And for myself personally, I'm also responsible for selecting the new science fiction books that we have in our collection, and I lead our sci-fi fantasy book club.
I'm Megan Nye. I'm a teen services librarian over here, and I do programming for our teens, our young adults. I do some collection development. I curate a lot of displays that you'll see around some of the branches. And do some readers' advisory, so it's a lot of fun to be able to spotlight some of my favorite sci-fi books and movies when I create displays. Okay,
so it's safe to say that you all like sci-fi, right?
Yes.
Okay, so why did you become interested in science fiction as a whole? Since it seems like you all like it and have found ways that sci-fi relates to your works in some way or another. So whoever wants to answer first, what got you into sci-fi?
I have an answer for this. When I was growing up, me and my family, we were Star Trek people. I grew up on Next Generation. My first crush was Captain Jean-Luc Picard. So it was always around. As far as reading goes, I was a kid very big into fantasy. And Anne McCaffrey tricked me. Guess what? There's science fiction in there. It's not only dragons. Spoiler alert. So I kind of fell into it from the fantasy angle. They're shelved together in lots of places, and I just started picking them up. Once my dad realized, hey, she's reading, he started throwing books at me. I think I read Foundation when I was like 11. So yeah, I found Asimov, and I just kind of kept on going from there.
Mine was also family related. My dad was a big science fiction fan, and my earliest movie memory was being taken to the theater to see The Wrath of Khan, which was completely appropriate for a child. I do remember having my eyes covered a lot, because they were that kind of parent, but I also remember having a lot of questions, because like what Hilary mentioned with children looking at the world, like I had no concept about black holes or outer space or spaceships and aliens and different things. So we sort of built off of that foundation, and it just became a thing that every time a Star Trek movie came out, my dad and I would go together. When I went to college, I would come home specifically to go see those movies with him. And the other franchise that I'll politely say got me into, but also partially scarred me with, was Alien. Because out of the chest, that was fun. Spoiler alert, sorry.
Yeah.
But I also remember the first thing I actively chose for myself was the sequel, Aliens 2. That ended up being the first movie that I went to on my own, and that is probably still one of my absolute favorite movies, hands down, ever.
So mine was also family related. My first introduction to sci-fi was from my parents and with the original Star Wars trilogy. That's probably one of the first movies I've ever seen. I mean, by the time I was in first grade, I could quote entire sections from the movie. And I think what really drew me to it was actually Princess Leia. Growing up in the early 90s, everything was Disney princesses, and that wasn't really, I mean, I liked some of that stuff, but here we had Princess Leia, and she was this tough and strong leader, and I wanted to be her. I was her for Halloween, and she was just great. So that was really, I think, the first identifiable moment.
That's the difference between you and me. You wanted to be Princess Leia. I wanted to be R2-D2, so. I used to sit on the back of the couch, and my brother would be Luke flying an X-Wing fighter, and I'd be sitting perched on the back of the couch going, yeah.
And I just didn't want an alien bursting out of my chest.
Well, which is fair.
That is completely fair. I would not want an alien bursting out of my chest either. From the sound of it, all three of you, at some form in your childhood, you got into sci-fi, and it really helped keep you curious in the world and what's out there. It sounds like movies as well had a huge impact in building sci-fi. So, say for teens or adults who have never tried sci-fi, never had that childhood experience of that great sci-fi adventure, how would you recommend people get into it or understand why others would get into sci-fi?
I would start with, I think they call it now near sci-fi, stuff that isn't so far out there that you don't need to suspend reality. It's not so hokey. It's more accessible. I would say read Andy Weir. I'm sure that you've seen the movie or at least seen the previews for the movie The Martian. The book is better. And his new book, Project Hail Mary, is awesome. I highly recommend. And it's a story that it's very character-based. It almost reads like a diary. You're talking to one person. It's not a hard sci-fi technical manual to the point where you don't even know what's going on. And they're just ridiculously fun. So I would definitely recommend Andy Weir.
Building off of that, I would say one thing I recommend to people is there are so many blended genres now. So for myself, my other favorite genre is mysteries. So my hands down absolute favorite are sci-fi novels with a mystery attached. So it's detectives solving a murder in a futuristic environment or on another planet or on a spaceship where they're getting picked off by a serial killer, which is also one of my favorite genres. So I think if you can find something that is blended together with your other, if it's romance, horror and sci-fi go together really easily, or mysteries, westerns, there's a whole subgenre called weird westerns. You can find that gateway for yourself by finding something that's familiar to you and then expanding that environment.
Yeah, what Shannon was saying, there's so many subgenres. I mean, and even now romance and sci-fi, who would have thought? I mean, there's the Ice Planet Barbarians series, which if you're into steamy romance and want to try some sci-fi, I've heard great things about it. Haven't read them myself. But I think just kind of getting your feet wet a little bit. I mean, if you're gonna, don't go pick up the 700-page,
Wheel of Time?
Right, or Hubbard, what was his?
Oh, L. Ron Hubbard.
L. Ron Hubbard. I mean, you're not gonna.
Yeah, that was not my way, so I can't even remember what the title was.
That's not gonna be a great place to start.
And get it from the library, because then you don't even have to finish it, and you can just return it if it's not for you. Try again.
Use the staff to help recommend the books that you should start with
I
as well.
like this, find me this, and we'll do that for you.
Okay. So kind of getting starting points. We know that sci-fi nowadays has been, well, over time really, with Star Wars or Star Trek making its way into popular culture, making its way into movies. How would you, for someone who says either watches Dune or Star Wars, how would you recommend they get started if they wanted to swap to a book or even find something that might be a bit more niche than what you would see in theaters nowadays?
I think the easy answer to that, I mean, if you watched Dune and you liked that, I mean, you might as well try the book. I'll keep my own personal opinions about Dune to myself. But if there is something that did resonate with you, that can be fun for some people. It's not for everyone, because you're like, I already know what happens, so why would I read this? But looking for differences, sometimes people like that, like, oh, what's different in the book versus the movie? Yeah, I don't know.
I think identifying what it is about, you know, the movie or the series that really resonated with you. So if it's, you know, you really liked, you know, the strong female character, and then you maybe want to try something that features a strong female main character. Or if, you know, kind of, if the movie was exploring kind of alternate histories, you know, you'd want to go for kind of more of that niche. So finding what it is about that book or what that book makes you feel. You know, this book, you know, really made me, you know, think about the importance of family or the importance of society, and then kind of picking that way, because I think then you're also going to be likely to pick up something that you wouldn't ordinarily pick up, but that might really connect with you. And that's always the fun challenge, right? Like, super popular stuff is great, like, wonderful, but there's so much else out there.
I think you were saying popular movies and things and how to get into the books. And if you like what's popular in the movies, you might like what's popular in the books. So start there. Andy Weir is ridiculously popular. And then what I like to do oftentimes is if you really like an author and you like what they're doing, look up on like their blog or look in interviews and see what they like to read. And that might bring you back in time a little bit, but you also might find these little different subgenres and things that you didn't know existed.
I would also recommend different formats, because I know movies are a visual and auditory experience that books aren't. And I love the Lord of the Rings movies. You cannot get me to touch the novels. Like, and I've always been that way. Like, I can't, anything, and I'm not a high fantasy or military science or space opera kind of thing either, so that does take me out of that genre. But I think for people who may feel the same way, or who have, you know, they've gotten that engagement because of the CGI and the visualization and the auditory, like listening to the characters with their different voices from, you know, the people who write these novels create these entire worlds with socioeconomic, political systems, you know, all these different levels of creating new characters, creating aliens. So if you can change that around to going to a graphic novel, which is still a visual medium, or going to an Audible or a audiobook, then you're still getting that immersive experience that's a little bit different than coming from this big, like, super bombastic movie theater and then sitting down with a book. So you still keep that engagement a little bit.
So I think something you've all mentioned at this point is genre and different genres all over. And I think if I recall correctly, sci-fi itself isn't just, boom, sci-fi, that's everything. Everything is just sci-fi. There may be a bunch of smaller genres or mixes of genres. What are different subgenres that you've enjoyed or think others might get out of or enjoy as well?
Personally, I like a lot. I like a lot of them. It's something that I know a lot of people don't like that I like, so if you're looking for recommendations, is military sci-fi. I like military sci-fi. I also really like horror sci-fi, like Shannon said. They go together very well. I don't know that to me, The Expanse is horror sci-fi. Maybe that's not everybody's opinion. Maybe I'm a wimp. but I would classify The Expanse as horror sci-fi, so I really like that. I also really love absurdist sci-fi. The title that you might recognize from that genre is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is probably the #1 best example out there. Just wacky, zany, where it's not so much the hard science, which I do enjoy, but it's just, what can my imagination do? Let's go hog wild.
It's interesting you said the absurdist, because Hilary and I are like on complete opposite ends here. I don't generally like that. I never could get into Douglas Adams or any of his stuff, but occasionally something will sneak past me, and it is because there's a different tie to it that I enjoy. So I am a big Star Trek fan now, which I recently only watched the original series. Like, I'd been into everything else, but I didn't actually watch those 3 years of the core material. But one of my favorite books now is John Scalzi's Red Shirts, which is just sort of a parody, or maybe a little bit absurdist, of that. The red shirt ensign is always going to die.
Spoiler alert.
Or I am a big fan of Larry Correia, and if you're a fan of a particular author who actually jumps genres quite a bit, he does fantasy, sci-fi. One of his #1 in customer service, Tom Stranger, Interdimensional Insurance Agent, is completely absurdist, because this dude is an insurance agent who bounces around to different galaxies and different timelines and basically protects their worlds from being destroyed by another alien race, or, if you have a policy with him, he'll take care of you. And it's actually an audiobook, and Adam Baldwin narrates that book, which just takes it to a completely different level, because he's really great. Plus, he doubles as a character on one of the Earth timelines. He's the president, too. So there's just some really fun differences in there that isn't quite the extreme absurdist kind of stuff, because I could tie it to something else that I really enjoyed. I also really like, since we talked about the mystery component, anything that is solving mysteries. So many of my favorite things are the detectives are either artificial intelligence, or they have some other science fiction aspect to it. Again, Scalzi, who has a wide range of materials, has a series called Lock-In, which is where a gentleman is actually paralyzed, but lives in a world where he can put his consciousness into an artificial body, and he's an FBI agent solving crimes. So you have that science fiction world in the background, but it's actually a straight up mystery that I could relate to.
So I gravitate toward, you guys mentioned horror and sci-fi. A lot of my favorite ones tend to be in that category. I was really enjoying The Passage by Justin Cronin. I actually had started reading that the beginning of 2020, before COVID happened, and I actually had to put it down because it was just too much, because it involves like a plague, contagion, and it was too much for me. But I'm hoping now that things are hopefully calming down, right? Fingers crossed. I'm hoping to get back into that, because I really enjoyed it. I got really sucked into it. And that's a trilogy. The first one is called The Passage. I also really like Joe Hill. Joe Hill is actually Stephen King's son, and sorry, Stephen.
I did not know that.
Did you really not know that?
Yeah.
know
Oh my word. Okay, but he's
doing here? I don't know.
sorry. Sorry, Stephen. Joe's better. He is better. His stuff is better. I like his stuff better.
I've read it, but
That's a take.
yeah.
So really anything. Nosferatu is probably his best one, I think. Maybe Horns. I go back and forth. Nosferatu also had a TV series. I think it was on like AMC. So if you'd rather start there, but lots of like different time travel, and then again, Nosferatu, the vampire tie-in. Apparently vampires seem to be sort of my deal.
Oh, vampires are always good. Vampires and zombies are pretty much just a slam dunk.
Because The Passage also was like a vampire plague. So apparently I'm just into vampires. Like, that's cool. I also like some dystopian kind of like reimagining it. So there's a book called Red Clocks by Lenny Zumas. And it's gotten a lot of comparisons to The Handmaid's Tale, and I actually prefer this one. And the world is very similar to our world. There's just slightly different laws, and it deals a lot with just questions surrounding fertility and motherhood and what it means to be a mother, and women's agency over their bodies. And it's kind of told in like different stories following 5 different women. And it's probably one of the most powerful books that I've ever read. So if you're into that kind of thing, you might want to check out Red Clocks too.
Okay, so it sounds like sci-fi as a whole is so wide, and this doesn't have to be like a big answer, but would you say that there's something in sci-fi for everyone?
I think so. I think, I think that even if you're not a huge reader, like Shannon said, there are graphic novels. You might try audiobooks, or even just, and very, very, very prevalent in this kind of area of short stories is sci-fi. There's a ton. If you just like to read, for 20 minutes, and you don't want to get into the big mega books that's going to take you multiple weeks, if you're a slower reader, and you just don't have that kind of time in your life because you have other things going on, try short stories. I know we have some collections in the collection, but even just online or magazines, there's a lot out there. So yeah, I would say for just about anybody, there's something.
Yeah, there is such a wide array of things. Like, I keep drilling home the mystery piece, but it is, you can pick your romance, you can pick, if you like historical fiction. I mean, one of the things that I don't think we've mentioned yet is that another name for science fiction is speculative fiction. Some people might be familiar with the idea of alternate universes or parallel or multiverse or different things. You can take our own history and spin it around to where you get an alternate take of who won World War II. Or you can go just a little bit further into the future and look at the irony of some of the most popular books a couple of years ago, like the one we did for the big read with Station 11, yeah. People really bantered back and forth on whether or not that was truly science fiction, but it was also about a pandemic and what happened with people. And so the basis of science fiction is actually things that could potentially be true compared to fantasy. We know there's possibly no such thing as witches in the world, but we don't know that there aren't aliens. We don't know that there can be a mutated virus that could turn people into zombies. Like, there is always that real potential, and you can just explore what those stories would be.
Well, and I think at its core, all sci-fi deals with the question of what does it mean to be human? What is our role in society? Even by looking at different histories, it still makes you question the role of humanity in that, and what defines you as a human? What characteristics define us as human as opposed to an alien or
artificial intelligence.
And how we deal with problems. A lot of sci-fi is how would we deal with this hypothetical problem? Something that I just wanted to mention, because I was thinking about it as we were talking. We are talking a lot of, like, what if there's an alien? What if this happens? There's a plague. What if all these things happen? But there's a big component in sci-fi that is like psycho sci-fi, that is talking about the way that people think, and it's a little more internal. So not everything is, if you're the kind of person who's like, I don't know, I don't really get behind like the cool spaceship. I get it, but it's not for me. Not all sci-fi is the cool spaceship and the technical things. Some of it is very internal.
Max Berry is kind of more internal, isn't he? Like
Yeah.
lexicon.
Yeah. He is, but he's a little more. He's another one I would recommend actually. It's kind of sci-fi light, in that it's a more of a fun romp, and they're quick books. Lexicon, the 22 Lives of Madison May. Don't quote me on that. I think that's what it's called. I enjoyed that one. It's kind of alternate, skipping timelines. It's a little murder mystery. It's a little graphic, so not overly so, but I wouldn't recommend it to like a teen. I would call it an adult book, but a little serial killer kind of vibe if you like true crime. But yeah, it's a little more. What can the human brain do? There's a lot, and Lexicon is one of those for sure.
Okay, so I want to give you all an opportunity to just gush about something, and so we'll see how much you gush about it. So, a favorite author, a favorite book, movie, series, something out there that you've enjoyed within sci-fi that you'd like to just talk about, make sure everyone knows that it's there. What is one thing, and say one thing.
Only one.
What?
Only one.
I'm Xander.
Just one thing.
Okay, I'll go. I have one lined up. All right, so my one thing is Orphan Black. It was a series on, I think it was at BBC America originally. It aired like back in like 2015-ish.
No, it's Canadian, isn't it?
It's Canadian, but I think it was on BBC America.
Oh, gotcha.
I don't know. Anyway, we have the DVDs and Blu-rays here at the libraries. So, and it was one of the few shows that my husband and I have watched together where it literally was like you could not watch without the other person because there were threats made. Like it was our show that we watched together. It's not a huge time commitment. It's 5 seasons, 10 episodes each season, and the episodes are like an hour long. It's sci-fi, but it's not like, it's set in a world that looks like our world, and it deals with clones. There's evil people in there. There is religious cults that also are serial killers. There's kind of something for everybody. There's a little bit of like kind of that cop drama going on. Have you seen Orphan Black?
Yes.
Okay. And what is her, Tatiana Maslany?
Yeah, her acting is
She
phenomenal.
plays 5 of the clones plus like some other extras, and it's phenomenal. Like they all have their own personality, their own history, and you watch it and you have to remind yourself, like, this is the same woman that's playing this. I don't know how she didn't win every single award under the sun for her acting in this. But I think it's a great one to start with, especially if you're not into kind of the super techie sci-fi. I feel like cloning is a huge thing, you know. Maybe, I don't know, I don't think we talk about it as much as we did like in the 90s when I was growing up, but it's definitely still very relevant. In this case, they're talking about cloning humans. Yeah, so I think that's my favorite thing. We're actually going to start a rewatch of it soon, so I'm excited to see how much stuff that I missed the first time around.
First, I'm going to start with, since Xander is being so cruel to us and limiting one thing, please come to the library and find us so that we can just gush about a whole bunch of other stuff and give lots of recommendations. Also, this is one of my favorite books, and it's the only one I'm thinking of on the spot right now because of what we had just talked about. It's called The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. And it was the most insane thing I had come across in the last couple of years. One of my absolute favorite films is Inception. And if you've seen Inception, you understand that there's multi-layers of storyline, that you cannot go get a snack or leave for the restroom because you're going to lose the thread. This book is very similar to that. It hits the sweet spot for me with the country house murder and a science fiction amnesia / time loop. So the basic premise is Evelyn Hardcastle, dies every 7 days. She's murdered. And our main character goes through a time loop where he has 7 days in one body of a witness to solve the murder. And if she dies, his time loop starts over, his memory is wiped, and he's in a different witness. So just the aspect of trying to understand, keeping all the clues together as he learns pieces from each of the different bodies. But then also, as the story goes on, you start to wonder how many times has he done this? Because he starts to sort of feel like he's losing his own identity based on all of these other people. And the other thing I really enjoyed about it is those other people are not likable characters at all, which usually bothers me. I don't enjoy a book where I don't relate or like the character. But this was very integral to that story because he's losing his identity. Obviously, they're not good people, so finding those clues and figuring out who the murderer is that big driving impact, but that's also the only way he's going to get out of this loop. And then the one big final surprise is, what's the deal with the time loop? Why is that happening? How did that start? And what's the implication of that once he finally breaks it, if he manages to do that? I listened to it as an audiobook. If you haven't figured out yet, I'm a big audiobook fan. And it does have a horror element to it where I got so freaked out I had to turn it off and just go get the book. So like the last third of the book I actually read in text because I could flip through the scary parts because I couldn't handle it anymore. So that's my one big recommendation, and I'm glad you guys nodded because you know what it is. Anybody else that I talk to, like, well, I don't know what that is. I need people to read that book so we can talk about it. So please, read the book, come find me at the library, and we will gush together, because I will be shocked if you did not enjoy it.
I think I just saw in an email somewhere that they just signed film rights for that.
That's amazing.
It's either that
so
or
excited.
the Evelyn Hugo one, which has like the 7 husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which is something very, very different. That's not sci-fi. So it's either that. I'll double check when we get back, and I'll email you.
Now you just teased me.
Yeah,
I'll email you. I'm like 99% positive though that it's.
Yeah, that would be a great, great film.
If I had to pick just one thing, which is, again, impossible, and I'm going to cheat a little on this, Doctor Who. I am a Whovian.
Yeah.
I am completely obsessed. I mean, but if I have to pick just one thing that I could stand up here and just talk for 3 hours about, it would be Doctor Who. I love Doctor Who. If you've never seen it, try it out. You do not have to watch it in order. I do not recommend that you watch it in order. It's also impossible because some have been lost. I would start with David Tennant's Doctor Who. We call him 10. Just pick a random episode. The great thing about Doctor Who is every episode is different because he has a time-traveling box that goes through space and time, and everything is different. You might get like a techie horror thing, or you might get something set back in the 1920s. It's different. There's something for everyone, like we've been saying. And there are books related to Doctor Who. I've listened to a few audiobooks that were actually narrated by, I think it was 11, whatever his real name is. I just
Matt
called
Smith?
him by the, yes, thank you, Matt Smith. And those were good. Also, there's a graphic novel that I cannot remember the name of because I didn't know I was going to get asked this question, that combines Doctor Who and Star Trek Next Generation, and it is amazing. So if you like either of those things, maybe check that out.
Okay, so the most important question out of all of this now is, who is your Doctor Who? 10. Okay.
It will always be 10.
I've actually got 2. Mine was Tom Baker, because that was the Doctor Who I grew up with my dad.
Number 2.
The iconic scarf.
Yes.
But mine would be 11's Matt Smith, because you cannot get past the Weeping Angels.
Yeah.
That storyline was
Don't blink.
hands down the best one out of all of them.
Okay. Well, thank you all for answering the most difficult question of them all, is pick one.
Well, now I want to spin it back on you. Do you have one?
Do I have one?
Yeah.
Oh, a sci-fi fantasy. Okay. Oh, I was not prepared for that.
Ah.
So let me
How
think
the
for a
tables have
second.
turned.
So I actually, okay, I've got it. So it seems it's probably actually a sci-fi slash fantasy. N.K. Jemisin's Broken Earth trilogy, as much as I loved it for the fantasy elements, when I really dig down into it, it is more of a dystopian sci-fi, because it is a future world that has been literally, I mean, it's called the Broken Earth trilogy for a reason. The Earth has been broken, but why? What happened is a lot of the mystery of the story, and so I adore her writing in that series in particular. And by the way, just for everyone to know, it won the Hugo Award. It didn't just win the Hugo Award for one of them. It won the Hugo Award back to back to back for all 3 books, 3 years in a row. So it is an amazing series. The first book, if you actually try it, it has first-person writing, second-person writing, and third-person writing, and it doesn't just do it to do it. There is a very distinct, important reason why it is written that way. And as most people don't write second-person, much less something that wins a Hugo Award, so just trying it out, it will be weird at first to get why are these characters in these different writing perspectives. But there is a plot reason why, and it would be an incredible spoiler to actually tell you why, but trust me in that it is amazing. The whole series there's romance elements, dystopian elements, whole questions of what is society and discrimination. It's incredible. I will always recommend it forever and ever, so that is my one.
It's a good one.
I'm not really believing that you were unprepared for that question at this point.
I am always
like
ready for that question.
Yeah.
I am always ready to talk about N.K. Jemisin.
He's
So
amazing.
I do have one other comment to make because I've always felt this way for years, and when I ask people, it's the star question, because many people are either fans of Star Wars, Star Trek, or door number 3. Can anybody think of what other Star franchise there is? I'm
my
ashamed of
brain
all of
is
you.
hiccuping
not
and
Battle-
going,
Stargate! Stargate!
Oh, I was obsessed with Stargate when I was a
Yes.
kid.
When I have to pick out of the 3, Stargate was my jam. Like, I'm not a big Star Wars fan, although The Mandalorian is amazing and it has sucked me in. And Star Trek, I have a very long history with they getting me into it, but then not being into it for a long time, and then finally coming around with the reboots and actually watching the show. But I was always a Stargate fan all along because of that uniqueness, like with Doctor Who. Every time they go through the gate, it's a completely new thing. It could be science, it could be fantasy, it could be horror. There was always something also tied to our own history, because the concept of the aliens actually gave us a lot of our mythology and Egyptian history. So yeah, I'm running through the history of the Romans, the Greeks, the Egyptian history that way. So it is that true definition of kind of the speculative fiction as well.
You know
So
what
that's my last
movie
plug.
as a kid terrified me, and I still to this day, like, I hate this movie, I can't watch it, is E.T.
Really?
Oh.
E.T. was terrifying.
It was scary. The whole like he's washing the dishes and like the steam in the back, like that.
Yeah,
that
like,
freaks me out.
and then
more
like
than-
at the end with like the containment like
Yeah.
tent thing, like I cannot watch that movie to this day. Like I cannot do it.
I remember watching it, but I was never a big, huge fan of it that grew up with
Yeah.
that, it's not the holy grail of sci-fi for me.
my E.T. was The Thing.
Oh, gosh.
Oh.
Amazing movie, but I can't.
I think I first saw it because it was
Yep.
my mother's favorite movie at the time, and I first got glimpses of it when I was like 7, and it scarred me for so long. I did not watch it again until like my early 20s, and I was like, why was this so scary as a kid? But then I was a kid, so.
Yeah.
Scary. We are talking the remake, right?
Both, really. I think I watched the original while I was watching the original first, and I was terrified. So,
Well, the one that most people think is the original is actually a remake. That's why I asked.
maybe I am tapping.
It's like, when was that? Like the first remake was made in like 1980 or whatever it was,
Yeah.
like around there. It's actually a remake, but it's probably one of the only remakes that is better than the original film.
Yeah, I'll give you
and then
that.
they made it again just recently, which I don't have any time for that.
Yeah, I didn't watch the newest
Let's get
one.
new ideas.
I've seen
didn't either.
clips
Yeah,
of
I
it,
know it.
but I think that's all we've got time for today. I'm sorry, everyone. You want to talk about
We're
sci-fi.
just gonna freak you all out and leave you with that.
But thank you all for watching, and from what we could tell here, all three of our panelists here have a lot to talk about with sci-fi, and I highly recommend coming into the library, finding someone, it could be these three, but someone in the building to help you find a sci-fi book, movie, series, graphic novel, something for you to read, because it sounds like there is something for everyone. You might not even think it's sci-fi, but there's sci-fi elements in it. So I wanted to thank you again for joining and watching, and we'll see you at the library soon.